Hello and welcome back to the Raw Rugby podcast. Super Rugby is also back, and as is Mr. Matt Toomua. Hello, Matt. How are you?
Hey, Christy. Welcome to you. Oh, it's good to be back, mate. I've picked up a mic for round two. I got a bit of feedback from the wife saying it sounded a bit echoey, and I was sniffling, and so expect a much more polished performance this time.
Second week, you're always trying to iron out those little kinks to begin with. Oh, look, I've got the microphone out myself, so I think we're the sound quality should be up and running. It was a big weekend, wasn't it? It kind of hits you for six all of a sudden when it all comes back, and you get 6 games, 3 on both 2 nights.
Yeah, it was great to get 3 on the Friday as well. And geez, went dipping our toe into it. The Chiefs Crusaders didn't look like they had missed a beat. I kind of first game back, you're expecting the rustiness, which we might saw of other games, but the Chiefs Crusaders really was an epic contest. Great to watch.
All right, so we're going to talk a bit about Super Rugby. We're also going to be welcoming Laurie Fisher, a man very familiar not only with Matt Toomua, but also with Australian rugby audiences. He's actually just been in Japan, and I think he's still there when we're going to be speaking to him. So awesome, we'll be speaking to him. We'll touch on Six Nations and Rugby Sevens. The Vancouver Sevens wrapped up over the weekend, and Michael Hooper will be making his debut, it looks like, it next week in Los Angeles. So lots to talk about here on the Raw Rugby podcast. You touched upon it. The Chiefs and Crusaders did welcome back Super Rugby to 2024. What a game. How good was it? Hamilton afternoon. It looked like afternoon rugby from an Australian perspective, but it was early evening in Hamilton. What a cracking game. The Chiefs hanging on 33-29.
Yeah, it was. Good crowd to start the year. I think, it's nice to get back into it. And the tries to start the game were brilliant. And I said it on Twitter or X or whatever you call it these days, the kicking rule, that the law variation that we've implemented, teams can't advance until they've been put onside. You saw that from the second try. Damien McKenzie had a unstructured field to attack, broken play, and it was brilliant. So it's nice to see that working. It was a good little implementation of an old law, I think it is anyway, from Super Rugby.
What do you think of D-Mac, Matty? Because he's a guy that has obviously played a lot of 10 for the Chiefs, but he's not quite. It may be similar to you, whether or not you were 10 or 12. There's been debate whether or not D-Mac is a 10 or 15, a utility player. Where do you see his best role at? Because he was quality. He was the difference. The Chiefs were humming when he was there at 10, and he went off, and then they kind of struggled a little bit, and the Crusaders came back.
Yeah, I think at a Super Rugby level, he's an amazing 10. The more you can get him the ball, and you see how the Chiefs like to attack. They put him in the backfield anyway, so he gets those broken field play options, which you kind of want from a 15, or which is what you get from your 15. So I think they've got a nice little balance there. The question is at test level, do you go for someone like him, or do you go with someone like Moanga, who's a bit more structured, plays the percentages? So it's a really tough one, because I think he's awesome coming on the last 30 against a tired defense, but at the same time you just want him touching the ball. But it's nice seeing his game grow a bit, because I definitely thought he was more of 15, but you can see him now. He can control the game from 10 very well.
What's it like when you're McKenzie in that first half was just awesome, I thought, because he took the ball to the line. He got hammered once or twice when he's distributing. When you're out there and you're getting wallets by a big forward or whoever it is, it might be a Hunter Paisami in the midfield. How do you get up from that and then have to go again? And then, what's it like? I know you get conditioned to it, but brings into what.
I think early in your career it might rattle you a little bit, but as you get on, you just kind of get used to it, to be honest with you. And for me, I would always like to go after their 10, or get someone to go after their 10, because you want them to start playing deeper, and then you can see what eventuates and becomes easy to defend. But so it'd almost be like a game of chicken. If I got a few late shots, I would almost take it as respect. I'd be like, they're trying to get me to play deeper. I'll do the opposite or whatnot. So it is a little interesting kind of mind game. But you see the good ones. Like, if you're not getting hit late, then you're probably not playing to the line enough. Johnny Sexton, probably the perfect example. Loves going to the line, playing those late balls, gets walloped, consistently. But he does his job, and it's kind of a part of the parcel. So Yeah, it's a fun bits of playing fly half, but yeah, it's definitely good part of the game.
Yeah, he's a perfect example, Johnny Sexton. Geez, at 37, 38, finishing up, he's a guy that will be missed by World Rugby, but the Irish, to be fair, handling it pretty well in the
Yeah,
post Johnny Sexton era.
isn't he the
So
10? The new 10, the young fella's been really good too. He's set up quite a few tries. So it just shows though, like you talk about, next man up. You talk about all the good sporting teams. In Australia, your Swans, your Melbourne Storm, the All Blacks, and Island Rugby. As soon as one guy's out, someone comes in and they fit into the structure, and it works well. So they've got something good going on there.
it's actually not a bad little segue talking about the tens, because the next game that followed, an Aussie derby between the Brumbies and Rebels, your former side, will speak a bit more about the Brumbies with Laurie Fisher, but the tens battle itself was a fascinating one, and it kind of almost it was synonymous with how the name kind of game almost played out. Noah Lolosio managed to run the ball to the line. He found some space at times. He was really polished in his performance. Carter Gordon struggled. And off the back of your comments last week, with would those scars kind of remain, we almost saw a little bit that come to fruition with Carter missing touch from a penalty. He hit the post as well. And it was a cracking game at points in time, but we saw the Brumbies just come out.
Yeah, I think I was 1 from 6 in my tips, but one thing I did predict was the tens battle. In terms of, as I said, I wasn't sure who benefits from last year, because as I said, I think Noah went away, and I think he got away from what was going on, and kind of there was maybe within the first 10 minutes around the middle part of the field, Noah gets to that first receiver, just has a little dink off his right foot, goes to the line, and that was really good to see. I was like, all right, he's taking it on. He's being aggressive. He's getting physical. I think if there were any criticisms of him in the more recent time, it's that he hasn't been physical enough. And it was really nice to see him confident going to the line. And then you saw he set up, I think it was a second try down the blind side off a rolling Moore, just going to the line, getting physical, getting stuck in. I thought that was really good. Carter probably, not the game, and from the Rebels in general wasn't probably the round that they were hoping for, the game that they were hoping for. Just way too many mistakes. Interesting one. It is only round one. Plenty of footy to be played, so I'm sure they'll be attending to it.
You're not wrong. Only round one, albeit it comes quickly, because Super Round is going to be in Melbourne, and there was only about 4,000 there for that first match, and we can kind of understand because tickets came on sale really late. But you would have hoped, in the same way that when the Western Force were in trouble in 2017, we saw Twiggy Forrest come out, and it almost was the springboard for a renaissance with the Force. We didn't say that necessarily with the Rebels, and it's a very different situation, one that's financially driven. But you do hope that more fans manage to turn up for Super Round next week. The Brumbies and the Rebels, I really like the fact that Luke Reimer, these sorts of guys, Charlie Cale, the back row balance of it, they dominated the set piece, particularly the line out, all those sorts of little things that is the hallmark of what successful sides are. Nick Frost did a great job there, disrupting line out ball. That allowed Noah Lolosio to kind of do what he did, didn't it?
Yeah. You look at the Rebels. The Rebels have got so much uncoachable talent. The offload, the flair. They've got some amazing individuals, but they were pretty poor on the basics. So playing in the wrong parts of the field, offloads that didn't stick. You look at their entries into the 22, missed a kick for touch. I think had 3 lineouts on the 5 meter, turned over, scrum penalty, disallowed try, kick at the post. Like, your entries into your 22, you want to be converting about 40% plus of that. And I think it was 0% for the Rebels. So just scratchy, I guess, the first week. And then you look at the Brumbies, turnover ball, 2 tries, I think 2 tries off kicks. So they were just a lot more polished and a lot better in the basics of the game, which I think at the start of the year has to be where you're at, because it just seemed too easy for the Brumbies, to be honest with you. I think they were happy, particularly with the first 50, but they didn't have to play amazingly well.
No, you're completely right. It was we saw guys like Lanikatau, Tom Wright, those that had missed out on the World Cup selection. Those sorts of guys, I wouldn't say that they were perfect in their performance, but they were pretty good. And matched up, they actually looked pretty even. I know that you're 1 from 6 in your super tips. I was 6 from 6, so I'll throw that one out there. But man for man, the Rebels should have probably been better. Was a bit of the baggage hanging over them, do you think, from the off-field situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I almost don't want to attend to it, because then you can kind of use it as an excuse every week. So I prefer to probably just look at the specifics of the game and where they struggled. And for me, it was just the kind of the looseness of the offloads or turnovers in the wrong parts of the field, and then line out in attacking line out opportunities. As I said, they've got a lot of X factor in that team. Carter, Lucan played well, Dalgunu as well. You've got a lot of guys in there who can kind of turn the game, but you kind of need to build that base, build that like solid foundation first, and play in the right parts of the field, and not waste half line break. Like a line break around the middle of the field is great, but you usually get tackled, another 10 meters or whatever, and you got to play risk reward a little bit. And so I felt there was kind of no real risk reward. It was all just risk. Now, how much the off-field stuff has in that, look, I'm super conscious of that and very kind of empathetic to what's going on. I also don't really want to talk about it too much, because then it becomes the excuse every week.
Yeah, and to be fair, Aussie Rugby's made a lot of excuses over the years, haven't they? Corey Toole, 2 tries, he was awesome, rapid. Just someone like him and his skill set, his elusiveness, his absolute extreme pace. If you're trying to impress like a Joe Schmidt or someone early on, he did a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, 2 tries in round 1 won't hurt. Little chip and chase, and I think he's got some genuine gas, genuine speed, which is awesome for us. You probably wingers kind of used to be the really quick guys. Then it kind of got a bit of the bigger guys who would use first phase, and then other teams now even will just play like 315s almost. So you don't have that kind of genuine pace, but you've got playmaker and whatnot. It's kind of cool seeing someone who's just got genuine X factor pace. Turnover, if you sling it to him, he's probably going to beat someone one-on-one. And he beat Lockie Anderson on that left edge in that first half, little chip and chase, and it was. Yeah, you can't defend that. Like, I don't care what system you got, you just can't defend that. So it's I think that's really cool for us, because it's different to probably every other winger in our competition at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. South Africa has done a great job by having that great blend, haven't they, between having the really big physical presence, your Damien Delanders even in the midfield, but then just having your pocket rockets out wide. Like, I don't know how big Kurtley Arnster is, but he and Cheslin Colby, like, they're pretty small guys that the Springboks have on the 2 wings. Could you ever see Corey Toole playing for the Wallabies and offering that different dimension to an attack?
Yeah, I could, for sure. I think, and I don't think that's a big statement, really. Like, his performance has showed that. I dare say he wouldn't have been too far away from it last year anyway. The Springboks are they're an interesting one, because they're so structured in how they pick their team, how they play, that each players you can pick, based on their attributes. They're going to have really quick wingers. They're going to have some massive number 6, direct runners. They're not usually massive on the pilfer game, but your 7's there. You got your 9 and 10 have to kick well. Your 12, your 13 are almost like back rows as well. So they just keep churning that out, and they have this system that's obviously very successful. And one of those is genuine gas on the wing, and it's nice for us to kind of have that in our pocket as well now.
Well, we'll see how the the Melbourne Rebels managed to bounce back this weekend. They're up against the Western Force. That'll be a big game for both their seasons in the context. We know that the Force struggled against the Hurricanes first up, a 44-14 defeat, set piece issues. But for a Rebels side that desperately needs to turn a new page, it's a must-win game for them early in the season, I think.
Yeah, and look, I think you'll get a good reaction. I think there's a lot built up on round one, and didn't get the performance that they were hoping for. So I think that this week against the Force, definitely a winnable game at home, Super Round. Like, there'll be a lot to play for. For me, just once again, making sure that emotion doesn't kind of override smart play. So let's, as much as we want to play and win the game from your own half, just build that foundation early, get set piece dominance. I'd be looking at the scrum on the weekend against the Hurricanes where they just, they got demolished. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if Taniella's starting. You get a few scrum penalties early, get to that line and just build the game from there.
And it's a very warm welcome to Lord Laurie Fisher. Laurie, we've finally got you here because for those that wouldn't be seeing the bloopers, we probably would have had a pretty good one there. It took a little while for you to join us, Laurie, but so good to have you here on the pod. Brand new Super Rugby season up and running. You know Matt Toomua very well. Off the top, Laurie, what's the story for Matt Toomua? What's something that the punters out there might want to hear?
Well, I think he's known as Mr. Squeaky Clean, mate. So there's not a lot there, I don't think. But I remember back in the early days when we first met Matt and his mum and dad, and I think we had who else's mum and dad came down pub?
Aiden, might have been Aiden Tour. Maybe,
Aiden Tour. Yeah, it was a real family affair, wasn't it? Lovely people. It was just finished school. Were you 18 then? 17, 18?
Yeah, 16, 17, pretty young 16, at that point.
17, gone to watching the championships. Queensland 2 won the schoolboys championships.
Your memory's very good, yeah.
Yeah, showed Quade Cooper up and all that. So I don't think you've changed much. You're a good player back then, mate, and you've had a great career. So I got no dirt, Christy. And if I did, if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
It's fascinating, Laurie, that you brought up that story, just because for the 10 minutes that it took for you to log on to the podcast, Matt was telling me the first time that he and his parents met you, and he also brought up that story.
Yeah.
I was saying, Lordy, obviously that time we met, everyone's on their best behaviour, and then Mum and Dad came down later in the season and watched a session down at Griffith Oval. And, you're barking away at us getting whatever. And Mum comes up to me later and she goes, "Oh, geez, Laurie's a bit loose with his language, isn't he?" A little, Mum, the good old Christian lady. Oh, she was a bit shocked. I was like, it's a bit different than, we're not exactly on our best behaviour there. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Laurie, you're up in Japan, and so you probably could have been recording this podcast in Matt's room, or a bullet train or two away. Tell us, what have you been doing in Japan?
I've just over at Rico Black Rams with Peter Hewitt, so I've just spent 2 weeks here, just again looking at their program, trying to help them out around aspects of the game, and there's obviously only so much you can do for the current season because they've got all their plans in place, but then it's really looking at where potentially they could make shifts into the next season. And they've obviously got ambitions to work their way up the ladder, and they probably don't have the spend that maybe the top 4 or 5 clubs do. So you've just got to make sure that your program, your coaching, and all the things that get the best out of individuals is in place. So just trying to value add in those areas.
Lordy, something I've been thinking about a bit when we knew you were coming on the pod is feedback from coach to player and player to player. Probably something that I've noticed in my career. Early days, feedback was quite direct, quite instant, and you knew. And maybe later on in my career, and I don't know if it's a case of, just because I'm in a different environment, but I've noticed it's not as direct from player to player, from coach to player. I don't know how you view that. I know, for me, it's probably one thing I've always appreciated about your coaching is you knew where you stood. as a coach, what are you, have you noticed that? And then is there an element of not deflating the player? What's kind of going on in your mind?
I think you can be honest with every player, but you can't be direct with every player. And I think there's a significant difference between the two, and we all know that you can't treat everybody exactly the same. So it's important to give good information. And I do think what's changed is the awareness of creating a much more efficient and effective learning environment. And it's a bit like the old saying that if, for teachers, if they haven't learnt, then you haven't taught. Well, if players haven't learnt, then you haven't coached. And I really think the teaching learning environment and how that works has developed and changed over time. So if I was teaching in a school, like you're not going to get the best out of students just by front and centre. You've got to find different ways, and coaching's no different. Probably early on, I would have learned the lessons of sometimes not being honest enough, sometimes being too honest. So it really comes down to knowing your individual athlete and establishing a relationship. And again, I think you hear a lot of talk about relationships and that being one of the most important parts of coaching, and that's true. If you have a relationship, then you can share information, you can be comfortable being honest, and then you can make progress.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. One thing as well is how do you find? Obviously, you want to cater to the masses, and you want to be as like you look at your players, and if they can take direct feedback or not, but then you also want to create a program that maybe has that robust feed. Like, at what point are you kind of setting up an environment that allows for that, but then also maybe being a bit pragmatic and realizing that a lot of these players don't like that direct thing, or I'm not going to get the most out of them. At what point, how do you kind of manage it to where you want to go and where it is? And
I think there's sort of two aspects of that. Like in a lot of my coaching, I try and think about the game in ways that if is it. I mean, I know the game's not black and white, particularly in the attack component, but in a lot of the other parts of the game, you've got to be able to set it up so you can judge people. There's a way of doing it. There's a good way and a less good way. So there's some real accountability. And I think if I'm clear with players about techniques that I want, about decisions that I want made in certain situations, then there becomes at least a reasonable element of black and white. You either did it or you didn't do it. You did it well or you didn't do it well. And I think if you can have a significant part of your coaching on that side, and then on the other side, it's, well, here's the picture, and there's no right and wrong decision. Just make a decision and run with it, and everybody else should support you. So on the black and white side of coaching, I can be really direct in my feedback and say, this is what we practice, this is what we do Monday to Friday. And this is, and we've all bought into saying, if we do this right, we'll get a result on Saturday. So I can be really direct in that feedback. And then in the feedback about where we're making decisions, when you got options about backing your judgment, backing your skill, then I'm just seeking feedback from you as a player about what you saw and why you made that decision, without trying to be judgmental about what you did and maybe discussing things we could do different next time. So there's sort of two compartments to it. I have a sort of a black and white compartment that I expect that there's rules that we've set and that you've got to abide by those, because I think if we abide by those rules, we'll get a result. And there's you as a player, seeing what you see, making decisions, understanding our framework, and backing your instincts as a footballer within the ambitions and structures that we have as a team.
It's an interesting one as well, because I find that how it's modeled from coach to player also gets represented player to player. So, in the good environments I've been in, where you're getting feedback, and it then almost allows you to hold players accountable on the field and discussing. Whereas maybe other environments where that culture isn't encouraged as much to kind of say, oh, look, I need this from you, or you need this from me, or whatever, then it becomes less. Yeah, I find the player-to-player feedback a lot less as well. I don't know if that's what you're trying to
look, and I think
encourage.
you're right, and it's really, I hesitate to say the most important, but in the end, things have got to be driven. The best programs are those things are driven by the players, and they're set up well by the coaches. Look, I'd spend a lot of time in my area making sure that I showed enough vision about what good looks like, and comparing that with what good, what not good looks like, so that again players have got a clear understanding of what good looks like, what good feels like, so that they then can, with confidence, help somebody, chip somebody, encourage somebody, whether it's a training or in a game, because they know what good looks like. If you don't, and if there's uncertainty, because I really believe there's so many areas of the game that you can create certainty, which then makes if you've got less parts of the game where you've got uncertainty, then you get a better balance. So we try to minimise, take some decision making out of areas of the game, make some black and whites, and then you've got less things to make more decisions about. And I think that helps players. So there's a strong education component, and if you're not sure yourself, then you're not going to chip somebody else. But if you're satisfied that you're doing what's required and you're doing it well, then you need to be dragging the rest of the team with you.
Laurie, I can see why you were a guest at the Nudgy Coaching Forum not that long ago, because all the wisdom that you're imparting now. You're in Japan, and the Black Rams just came up against Kobe on the weekend. Tell me, did you catch up with Dave Rennie? I imagine that you would have had an interesting conversation or two. And what's it like, and what's his environment like? And are you disappointed that environment wasn't allowed to kind of thrive into 2023?
Yeah, look, I had a good chat with Dave yesterday. It was great to catch up. He's really enjoying his time over here. It's sort of a fresh start, isn't it? And a new environment. And it's got plenty of challenges, as Pup knows, with language and styles. But he's enjoying himself. We really spoke about the future as opposed to the past. That's happened, and really there was no point in dwelling on that. But I did feel, in my small time at the back end of 2022, I felt there were genuine areas of progress, and I feel as though that we identified them through the Northern Hemisphere tour, and we're in a good position to progress our game in 2023. How far that was going to be, who knows? But I definitely felt that we had identified some really, really key areas, around ball retention, or around ruck speed, around what we do in defence. I think it would have really put us in a good stead for World Cup. But yeah, so that was disappointing. But in the end, you move on and you attack what's in front of you, and you leave what's behind you. And when you've coached for a long time, as Dave has, like he's got a way that he sees the game, and whether it's the Chiefs or whether it's the Wallabies or whether it's Kobe, that he's trying to get them to play a style of football that he's comfortable with and he knows works. And you can see a lot of that in Kobe in their counter-attack game, in their kicking game. You can see that New Zealand influence around breakdowns. So he's moved on and reinvigorated his coaching.
Another program that obviously you spent so long out, the Brumbies. I'm curious, the Brumbies have made another positive start to this season. You're no longer there, but I don't know, maybe you're dropping in here or there. I think you're doing that at various programs across Australia at the moment. But, the Brumbies, and Matt, I'm sure you'd be able to answer and have your own 2 cents on this. Brumbies have been so consistent for so long, but haven't been able to get across the line and get, big silverware, make finals often. Why do you think that is, Laurie? Why do you think, what's the missing couple of percent that sees a good side become a great side?
Look, yeah, if I knew the answer to that, we'd have won the last 2 Super Rugby titles, mate. But we haven't. So, but we're knocking on the door. We knock on the door because we're consistent. That we have over the last period of 6 or 7 years, we've had a style of game that which we've continually tried to expand upon, and you know, Stephen's got some ideas which will take the team forward. You know, whether it's in counter attack, whether it's in first phase play or that. So yeah, I think the team's evolving. What I saw on the weekend was again some set piece proficiency, really well organised early season, attention to detail around breakdown. I know we got beaten at the punch on a couple, but you could just see the cohesion in the team built from a lot of guys playing a reasonable amount of football together over a reasonable period of time, and not chopping and changing. You know, what's the flavour this year? Or we need to do that. We're just chipping away at being better. And so I don't think there's a quantum shift in anything that will take us from where we are to winning it. Sometimes you need a little bit of luck. I do think we need, you know, we've been chasing a little bit more adventure with the ball. Is that a little bit more offload, a little bit more adventure in counter, a little bit more in our attacking kicking game? I'm a little bit, maybe a little bit harder on opposition ball on the ground, make them work a little bit harder for their possession. So there's bits and pieces, but there's no one thing that'll take us from where we are to being champions in 2024 or beyond.
Yeah, I always found, Laurie, with the Brumbies, and probably noticed it when I left, that we used to do the good, the hard stuff really well. Our breakdown, our work rate, our physicality, and we maybe lacked was probably that kind of individual brilliance. I don't know if that's a case of signing or whatnot, but we were always going to be, you know, top 4, top 6, because the base of our game, the strength of our game was always so solid. And then probably something I took for granted going to other teams where we probably try to skip those levels and just kind of go. And I thought the Rebels game was probably a really good example of that. The Rebels, you know, lots of unforced errors around the middle of the park. And I think that's something that the Brumbies have done really well. But yeah, maybe that, I don't know if it's personnel, but getting a little bit of gloss on that. Yeah, I don't know. I've always
a little bit of gloss, or just a little bit of freedom to play. And look, Corey Tools, obviously, he's going to value add to that. You probably want you want Noah to play with a fair amount of freedom. You want a bloke like Tommy Wright again, and you know, with the freedom to play and to use your skill, there comes mistakes, and you know, you've only got to read any social media and you make a couple of mistakes and the world hates you. But giving people the freedom to make a mistake or two in pursuit of trying to be a little bit more adventurous and courageous in the attacking game. I mean, that takes courage from the coach, takes courage from the players, and I think we're down. I think they're certainly heading down that track now. Now, if I look at Tommy Wright's game, who's copped a lot of criticism over the last 12 months, the amount of last passes he threw for tries last year was absolutely phenomenal. And people get hung up on a mistake here and there, and again, it's, you know, we too glass half empty. We need to be more glass half full in the way that we look at rugby. I look at the Rebels on Friday night, pup, like 16 A zone entries for a penalty goal. Like that is criminal. Absolutely criminal. And the thing that then, like if Brumbies give up 16 A zone entries against the Chiefs or the Crusaders or the Hurricanes, they're not winning 30-3, I'll guarantee you. So there's things in the Brumbies game that they need to tighten up, and some of that's around discipline. But yeah, you'd be wanting maybe 9 or 10 A zone entries for an opposition as a max. So they've got things to fix up, but I just didn't see enough discipline and cohesion in the Rebels game to say that it was any better or any different to 2022 or before.
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because I said it to Christy before, so it shows that you've rubbed off on me at some point. One thing I did want to ask about is, obviously you've been around for quite a while, and one thing I've noticed with players, maybe the younger players, is that proactiveness or leadership, encouraging that. How do you encourage that in an environment where, like, and I was one of them, where at 16 you're in a program and everything's dictated, you know what you eat and sleep in, and that. How do you encourage I don't know if it's leadership. I don't know if it's proactive or an element of care, but I definitely found later in my career, guys were very much, what they were told to do, they did. And then when we had COVID happen and we had to kind of fight for our contracts a little bit, and there was a lot of negotiation with RA, and guys seemed there wasn't much. They were kind of looking to, who's got to tell us what to do. I don't know if you've noticed that, and I don't know how you may, encourage players to kind of step outside or not just follow the script.
Yeah, I mean, what I encourage players to do is to earn the respect of their teammates, and if you earn the respect of your teammates, then they'll listen to you. Don't need to over talk, but how do you earn the respect of your teammates? By fronting up each day, by training well, by doing all those things that help you as a player, help the team. And I think if any individual player, whether you're 18 or 38, if you apply yourself to doing the things that earn respect within the team, then the team will respect you. They'll listen to you because they know that where your care factor is, and the fact that you've done the work, and then it's not an age. It's not driven by age. It's driven by levels of commitment to the cause of the team. And I think traditionally age, leadership is experience. Leadership is I've been here for a few years, but I think that to me that no longer stands true. Particularly leadership maybe in a particular area of the game. Like I know I look at the Brumbies, someone like Luke Reamer who's been there a couple of years now. Like he should be. He can take leadership in that tackle contest part of the game. He could be talking, in a break in play about what we need to do or what we need to do differently. So, it's not an age or experience. It comes from application and from earning respect, in my opinion.
I'll tell you what, Laurie, Luke Reimer, his work over the ball, that would have impressed you over the weekend.
Yeah, I was really impressed because he's done it at the front end of a game, which we all knew he would. But it really good, and whatever it was, 16 tackles. So he gets through a strong work rate, and I know some of the numbers that we'd get, say between him and Rory Scott for an open side flanker, like over the course of 80 minutes, in terms of tackles, carries, affecting opposition ball, phenomenal output from those two guys, and Jerome Brown's the same. So I was really impressed with him. Every year he's toughened up a little bit more. He's really mature now. Like he's an adult now. He wasn't 3 years ago. So he's well on the way to forging a really solid career.
People will be asking the question, what else are you doing this year, Laurie? Like, you're with the Junior Wallabies. I know that Joe Schmidt's on the hunt for a couple of assistants himself. Perhaps we'll find you and your bucket hat there. What would you like to do over the next 12, 24 months in your career, like having stepped away from the Brumbies full time?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I initially stepped away, so it was to make sure that I gave back to the game. That's given me a lot over a period of time, and so if you step away a little bit from the elite level, and we've spoken a lot about our developmental levels, our 18s, our 20s, and making sure that we're broadening, not only broadening the base, but we're broadening the quality as well. And I think that's a huge area of growth to sustain and improve our top end is what we're developing. So to make sure that I'm involved in helping the next generation of professional players perhaps come through at a higher standard, and then also to do as much as I can out there helping coaches. So whatever coaching courses are on, helping out, back down, helping out my local club, the Owls, and not more so about coaching the coaches rather than the players. So just trying to give back to the game over the next few years, and in between, a few trips down the coast, a couple of schooners, a bit of fishing, and some family time as well.
Laurie, always.
And a coffee pub, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. At 2 before 10,
2
right?
before
Yeah.
10.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Cheers.
I think we're going to have to get some sponsorship dollars coming from there soon enough, Matty. Laurie, always good to have you join the podcast. Fly home safely. What times do you fly back to Japan, back to Australia?
Yeah, 10 o'clock tonight. So I'm just in at Rico today. We're just finishing review from yesterday, and a little bit of tidy. I pack my bags and head into the lounge.
Oh, awesome! You fly home safe, and make sure you have a quiet beer or two on the flight home. And we'll see you again shortly. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks a lot, Laurie.
Thank you, lads. Take care.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Always good to have Laurie Fisher join the Raw Rugby podcast, a man with a hell of a lot of experience. What's your kind of other impression of Laurie Fisher, Matty Toomua?
Yeah, it's an interesting one when you start, as a young player, you're scared of him really because he's this
Really
intimidating looking guy. He's very vocal, but it's really cool as you grow up a bit, and even in that conversation there, you realize there's a lot to him. He thinks deeply about his craft, and look, I haven't come across a coach who's more well respected than Laurie amongst the players who he's coached. And that's not because he's blowing smoke up their ass. It's because he's detailed. He knows exactly what he wants. And it was interesting hearing him say how he in a game of grey, he likes to find black and white, and I think that's like so valuable for players, where your clarity is kindness kind of thing. I heard one of our coaches used to say that clarity is kindness. Like if you can find black and white in certain areas of the game, that's all you want as a player, because then you know what's expected of you. You know where you're going to be accountable to. So, it's cool seeing it's not just a fluke. He works hard.
Yeah, he also used the word care. And, in terms of respect and getting respect from players, and players have got to, find respect within themselves. He's a guy that has had so much respect built off a couple of decades. And I think that he'd be perfect for the Wallabies coaching setup. If Joey Schmidt's looking for someone, he's the first person I'm getting to join the Wallabies.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but it was when Eddie came in and you heard that Laurie was out, I personally thought that was a missed opportunity.
Where does Laurie, like, I know that everyone respects him immensely. Do you think that he would be the perfect sort of figure that joins a Joe Schmidt coaching team? And if so, what are some of the characteristics that make him an ideal candidate?
Oh, for me, yes. But hearing him talk there as well and coaching the coaches, that's really interesting as well, because I think that's an element, our coaches' development, we spoke about last week, that we've lacked in Australia for a while. So having someone like Laurie in that area would be great. With the Wallabies, yep. Look, any team he's coached, it does the hard stuff well, does that breakdown well, and I'd love to see our Wallabies being a team that's really hard to beat, that they're just tough, and at breakdown they're going to compete for everything. And then we can add the gloss that we're talking about. Joe Schmidt sounds like he's got a lot of systems in attack that he works really well with. But I think if you're not winning that physical battle, then you're not getting any points in a test match. And I think Laurie brings that for me. And I think there's no one better personally that we could have. But hearing that he's passionate about coaching coaches as well is awesome, because I think that's kind of what we need in Australian rugby.
Yeah, we don't have enough mentorship, and we know that Wayne Smith, he gives back, Graham Henry gives back. What do we do with our coaches, generally speaking? I wrote a story about this last week. Generally, a lot of our former Wallabies coaches or experienced ones end up falling out of the system more often than not, because the results haven't gone their way, and then they get left out.
Yeah, I read that. Well done. It was a good article, because you kind of get this progression to the top, and then you just fall off, and then we don't hear about them, and then we go, we don't have good Australian coaches or whatever. And it's like, no, we do, but we haven't kept them in our environment, or, for want of a better word, ecosystem. Someone like a Ewan McKenzie in a director of rugby role would have just been exceptional. Like we've spoken about Andy Friend a lot, but we've had a lot of guys go up to Harlequins and succeed really well. It just, we need to take care of them a bit more. Maybe stop being so impatient, to be honest.
All right, turning our attention back to Super Rugby. There were a couple of good games as well on Saturday. Queensland Reds, New South Wales Waratahs played. Awesome to see a derby actually kind of live up to a bit of expectation and hope, because we'd seen the Chiefs Crusaders put on a show. We'd seen Moana Pacifica and the Highlanders have a great match up there under the roof in Dunedin. To see the Reds take it, play a really nice attacking brand of rugby in wet conditions, I was pretty impressed with especially the Reds. But I thought the Tars, they showed elements of physicality with like an Izzy Parisi, just not enough of it though.
Yeah, you're right. I think I'm really excited to see Hunter this year. I don't know about you, but I was pretty disappointed from last year that he didn't get to go to the World Cup, because he was someone who shone so well at the start of the 4-year cycle, and to not have him there was hard. But I also don't know what you think about Liner. I thought he was pretty decent as well.
Yeah, skill set, isn't it? It's we know what he's offering. I thought he was understated, which is not a bad thing at times, being a 10. If you've got a power midfielder like a Hunter Paisami, or please use it. But also on wet conditions, turn oppositions around and play field position.
Yeah, he has that control about him. He doesn't seem too rushed. He probably plays a bit more of like a test match type game, where he is, like he just underplays his hand and then looks for opportunities late. So I think he'll be exciting. As I say, he's not necessarily your step offload kind of fly half, but he's a guy who can kind of control the game really well. And I think that's something that we need in Australian rugby.
Yeah, and you look at Carter, the conversation all year, I think, is going to be around the 10s, because, 10s and 12s, to be frankly honest. Sama Karevi's still up in Japan. So, Lalakai Fekete, we know he had a pretty serious injury at training, and fortunately, it's not necessarily life-threatening or career-ending that, but the 10-12 spots are so open, and what kind of style Joe Schmidt wants, we don't really know what he wants necessarily from his next 10. Where do you kind of see that picture going forward?
Yeah, I think Carter's playing well. Carter's got the most complete game. And watching the Force game, I actually felt that they probably have the 10-15 the wrong way around. I'd probably like to see Donaldson at 15 and Bury at 10. He's a lot more direct, squares the attack up a little bit more. And I think Donaldson, in the first World Cup game, he scored a bucket load of points from 15. I think he probably suits that a little bit more. It's an interesting one. Australian rugby, we've often gone 10-12 as our playmakers, and then the 15's been like a runner or an athlete, whereas we're kind of moving towards a New Zealand model now, where it's 10-15 playmakers and big upright centres. So it's I don't know what you think about Donaldson and Bury, but I'd like to see them probably switch that around, because I think he laid the foundation quite well.
Yeah, I actually completely agree. I touched upon it in the story today, and I think Bury, he's got that real acceleration, and you spoke about the desire to attack the line. I think he's a natural runner of the ball. We've seen him do chips and chase last year. He played probably the last handful of games for the Force at 10, and he just looked at home there right from the outset. So it would be the difficult thing there with Ben Donaldson is that he was shuffled between 10 and 15 so much with the Waratahs last year. We saw it with the Wallabies too. I wonder what it would do for his confidence there, knowing that his preferred position's at 10 as well. So that's another layer. At the end of the day, if they don't have a forward pack, if they don't have a tight 5 that can get them on the front foot, it probably doesn't really matter who's at 10, right?
Yeah. You saw that on the Hurricanes just physically dominated them in the contact area, their aggression, scrum we spoke about earlier as well. So, the 10-15 argument might be a little bit of a moot point. That being said, I think it would be something you'd want to make early in the season rather than later. But, we'll see how it evolves. They'll it will be an intriguing clash in it as well if we have Donaldson and Carter this week, considering they were the two of our 10s at the World Cup.
Yeah, indeed. So Super Round this weekend. There's 3, the Melbourne Rebels, Western Force. That's the one local Aussie derby. high stakes for both games, but there's 3 Trans-Tasman fixtures as well. You've got the Hurricanes, the Reds, you've got the Waratahs and Crusaders up against Rob Penny, a familiar face and someone that was shown the door after about a month in his second season in charge of the Tars. So he'll have a little bit more for this game, I imagine, but also the Brumbies and the Chiefs. Does it feel like a bit of an early litmus test around where Australian rugby's at this year, given that, the Trans-Tasman fixtures here on Australian soil?
Yeah, sure. Look, Sunday looks like a good day for us in the sense that Chiefs, Brumbies, and who else we got on that day? Reds and Hurricanes. So I think they're games that we could, potentially, do all right in. Litmus test. Look, maybe. I think, unfortunately, we probably know where we are at the moment. We know where a lot of the teams are, and it's not where we'd like them to be. That being said, I think, usually we have about 2 teams that can compete quite well, and I think it might come down to that Sunday, because at this stage probably looks like the Reds and the Brumbies are our kind of early favourites in Australian rugby.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the Waratahs, with Darren Coleman and the uncertainty surrounding his future as well, it's important that they stand up and show what they're accounted for. Ned Hannigan, whether or not he's back in time, we'll see. But there's enough in that forward pack for the Waratahs. They should be. Angus Bell there. We know that Fergus Lee Warner and Miles Amatisero, they made their debuts, probably didn't quite have the impact that they wanted. But there should be enough in that side, particularly with their back three, their back line, that they're firing a few more shots. With the Crusaders, are going to be difficult. But
yeah, and they beat the Crusaders a couple of years ago, didn't they?
They did at Leichhardt.
Yeah, that's right. So they've got, I think they've definitely got the players, and I think it's pretty exciting as well that we talk about like a prop as one of the exciting guys, because it's not usually something that we have in Australian rugby. But he's been exceptional, Billy. He's been he's been developed so well. He's such an athlete. So I think, you're right up front. I think they have they can compete. I don't know. Just maybe that first game wasn't as polished, or it didn't show enough. As you'd like, but we would always want the Waratahs to do well for Australian rugby. And then look, the Rebels. We know the Rebels have got maybe the Rebels and the Waratahs. It's kind of good not speaking about them too much, because maybe they can go under the radar a little bit. But we know there's a lot of hope there, and there's a lot of promise there. There's good coaches, good players. So maybe going under the radar will be beneficial for them.
One other thing that came to our attention on Friday night was the mouthguards that just kind of popped up, and concussion. It's an interesting kind of subject, but that's all going to come to a head as well. And those sorts of things you would imagine would be discussed on later this week when the respective Super Rugby boards, the Rugby Australia and the New Zealand Rugby Board, they have crunch meetings around not only what's the future look like for the competition, but things like concussion and how they deal with various subject matter like that.
Yeah, look, for anyone who watched the Chiefs game, I think there were two players taken off in the first game because the reading crossed the threshold, and they've been using it in Six Nations, and apparently there was only 1 or 2 in three rounds of Six Nations. So it was it's pretty controversial. I think one thing that became quite obvious for me is that post-match Scott Barrett was criticising it, the commentators criticising it. So the implementation of the mouthguard and why it's been implemented, it clearly hasn't been explained well to players or to coaches. I don't know about you, if you had to Google what was going on, because I didn't know.
Yeah, well, it certainly didn't look like Anton Leonard-Brown had any idea what was going on towards the back end of that game in a crunch moment when he gets dragged. It could have had something to do with a blue chip malfunction there, but I agree with your point around the fact that the commentators they very much need to be informed around, what are you doing this for, and what's the purpose behind it, so that they can inform the audience, so that it doesn't look like everyone's confused and looking around like headless chickens.
Yeah, look, when it happened, I started, speaking, and I spoke to the guys over at Progressive Rugby, and they were saying that because my question was, well, there must be a different threshold for every player. Does Nick White, is he going to have the same threshold as a Taniela Tupou? I don't know. The argument put by Progressive Rugby was that often when you get a hit to the head, you might not be symptomatic, and it might come later, and when you become, and in that period of time, it is a very, very high risk moment to figure that second hit syndrome. So that was really interesting to me, because I'm like, okay, well, if he's not looking like he's concussed, how can you tell if he is or not? And they're saying, no, there's a body of research kind of showing that you could get like a subconcussive knock that then isn't treated, and you're actually at much more higher risk. And for me, great, good science tick, we're taking care of all of that, but we haven't implemented it well. Like I think the Reds players were complaining that they had to try these mouthguards on 3 days before the first game. Commentators have been told about it. You didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. So it might be good science, but it's probably a lesson in PR that we haven't sold this enough to people. And telling Anton Leonard-Brown, this is why you're coming off, is because we're gathering more data as well for future to make the game safer as well. But also there's a very big risk here of you getting a second knock. And so I think once you explain that, it alleviates some of the anxieties. But for me, it just sounds like it's another thing that hasn't been done correctly, despite it having, a good, we probably agree it's a good thing.
Smiling, lesson in PR. It seems like Super Rugby's not necessarily always nailed that in the implementation.
We fired the marketing pigeon, didn't we, last week? I'm not very the tutor advocate. We're onto it.
Unfortunately, it's the second time in 2 years that has occurred. Redundancies at Rugby Australia. So 7 of those, in fact, including the head of marketing there, as well as outgoing Anthony French. But look, a couple other things around the traps. Sevens has just been taking place in Vancouver. We know that the women bowed out in the semi-finals, the 21-19 defeat to France in the semi-final before losing to Canada in the bronze medal match. The men had a much tougher campaign. They struggled throughout the pool stage, didn't make it to the finals. Michael Hooper should make his debut, though, next week.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. I think you saw Anton Dupont getting all the praise and glory from his first competition in the sevens game.
He was pretty good.
He was. But he's a freak, isn't he? I think he's going to be up there with one of the best players to ever play the game. But so it doesn't matter what kind of hybrid game he's playing. He's amazing. And it'll be good to see Hoops, see how much speed he's got left in those old legs. I'm super excited. He's a champion man, and I think if anyone can do it, he can.
So that's on next weekend. So do watch that. Finally, Six Nations third round there, and we saw a couple of interesting results. Scotland breaking a huge drought there at home against England to win a massive game, the Calcutta Cup, with Scotland for another year. But in addition to that, we saw Ireland really shut out Wales. Comprehensive victory, not really a surprise there. The Irish still humming. And a 13-all draw between France and Italy to wrap it up.
Yeah, indoor conditions. Only in the Six Nations would there be a 13-all draw. No, look, there was a bit of controversy at the end there as well. Somehow the ball's fallen off the kicking tee in indoor, so I don't know what's going on there. If they turn the air blowers or the air conditioning from the south side, try to get it off, but. Bit of drama. It's such a good competition, isn't it? And I think seeing Scotland, seeing Finn Russell at the moment, he's very Quade Cooper 2011. Like anything he touches is just, gold at the moment. He's just got that kind of Midas touch. So there's a lot coming out of there.
Oh, he's got to be the most exciting 10 to watch in world rugby, Finn Russell, and he probably has been for a while. But he's maybe finding that consistency in his game.
Yeah, I think I saw him trolling the English on Instagram or something, saying 4 in a row, and I like that. It's I think we need a little bit more of that in entertainment and rugby. So it's always nice when someone beats the English. Yeah.
Well, we like an underdog story. They'll always be the underdog, Scotland. And look, heaps of underdogs this weekend, particularly in Super Rugby, and it'll be fascinating next week when we chat again to see how Australian rugby's fared. Look, thanks for coming on, Matt. Thanks. It's good to see you. And look, round 1 of Super Rugby, it's in the bank. We can check that off. But thank you for everyone for listening as well. And please make sure you rank, review, and shout out. Let us know what you're thinking, what you want to hear more of. So that's really important to us.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks, everyone.